In the heart of Detroit's abandoned industrial district, where rusted factories stand like monuments to a forgotten era, construction worker Thomas Simmons made a discovery that would reopen one of the city's most haunting cold cases. It was a typical Tuesday morning in March 2024 when his excavator's bucket scraped against something that shouldn't have been buried 3 feet underground in what was supposed to be virgin soil. The small, rectangular device was barely recognizable. At first glance, 8 years of Michigan weather had taken their toll, but the distinctive shape and the partially visible badge number told a story that sent chills down Thomas's spine. This wasn't just any piece of discarded electronics. This was a police body camera, and according to the faded serial number, it belonged to Detective Olivia Green, who had vanished without a trace in October 2016. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel by clicking the icon in the bottom right corner of your screen. Now let's get into the story. Thomas immediately called 911, his hands shaking as he explained what he'd found. Within 20 minutes, the construction site was swarming with police officers, crime scene technicians, and detectives who had worked Olivia's original missing person case. Among them was Detective Ryan Hughes, now graying at the temples and carrying the weight of 8 years of unanswered questions about his former partner. The body camera was carefully extracted and transported to the Detroit Police Department's forensics lab, where specialists worked around the clock to recover any salvageable data. What they found would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about Detective Olivia Green's disappearance and expose a web of corruption that reached into the highest levels of the department. Olivia Green had been a rising star in the Detroit Police Department. At 29, she was one of the youngest African-American women to achieve the rank of detective, and her dedication to justice was legendary among her colleagues. She came from a family deeply rooted in faith and community service. Her brother Benjamin Murphy served as pastor at Mount Olive Baptist Church in Detroit's East Side, where Olivia had grown up singing in the choir and volunteering at community outreach programs. Her disappearance in 2016 had shaken the department to its core. Olivia had been working late on what appeared to be routine case files when she simply vanished. Her car was found the next morning in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner on 8 Mile Road, keys still in the ignition, her service weapon secured in its holster on the passenger seat. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, and no surveillance footage that provided any meaningful leads. The initial investigation had been thorough but ultimately fruitless. Detective Hughes, who had been Olivia's partner for 3 years, led the search efforts with the desperation of someone looking for family. He interviewed dozens of suspects, followed up on hundreds of tips, and refused to accept that his partner had simply disappeared into thin air. But as weeks turned to months and months turned to years, the case grew cold, relegated to a file drawer that Hughes would visit whenever insomnia struck, and the weight of failure became too heavy to bear. Now, 8 years later, the discovery of Olivia's body camera promised to finally provide answers. The forensics team worked with cutting-edge data recovery techniques, painstakingly piecing together corrupted files and damaged storage components. What emerged from their efforts was a digital timeline of Olivia's final days that painted a picture of a detective who had stumbled onto something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The recovered footage showed Olivia conducting what appeared to be routine surveillance operations, but closer examination revealed she was documenting meetings between fellow officers and individuals who weren't in any official police databases. She had been building a case, meticulously gathering evidence of corruption within her own department, and she had been doing it alone. Captain Gabriel Hayes, who had overseen the original investigation into Olivia's disappearance, found himself in the uncomfortable position of reviewing evidence that suggested the very people he had trusted to find her might have been involved in her disappearance. The implications were staggering. If Olivia had indeed uncovered a corruption ring within the department, her investigation could have threatened careers, pensions, and possibly even lives. As news of the body camera's discovery spread through the department, old alliances began to fracture and long-buried secrets started to surface. Officers who had worked alongside Olivia found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about their colleagues and their department. The tight-knit community that had once rallied together to search for their missing colleague now viewed each other with suspicion and fear. Detective Hughes threw himself into re-examining every aspect of Olivia's case with the intensity of a man possessed. He spent hours reviewing the recovered footage, looking for clues he might have missed 8 years earlier. What he found was evidence of his partner's incredible courage and determination, even as she documented corruption that could have ended her career. Olivia had continued to approach her work with the professionalism and integrity that had defined her entire life. Chapter 2. The investigation begins. The recovered footage from Olivia Green's body camera painted a disturbing picture of the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Detective Ryan Hughes sat in the department's audiovisual room, watching hours of recovered video with the kind of focused intensity that had made him one of Detroit's most respected investigators. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about his former partner's final case. The earliest recovered footage dated back to September 2016, just 6 weeks before Olivia's disappearance. The video showed her conducting what appeared to be routine patrol duties, but Hughes noticed something unusual in her behavior. Olivia was documenting everything, every stop, every conversation, every interaction with both civilians and fellow officers. This wasn't standard procedure, and it suggested she was building a case that required an unusual level of documentation. In one particularly revealing segment, the camera captured Olivia observing a meeting between Detective Connor Ross and a man in expensive suit outside a downtown parking garage. The audio was partially corrupted, but lip-reading specialists were able to determine that money was changing hands. More disturbing was the timestamp. The meeting occurred during Connor's scheduled patrol hours, meaning he was conducting personal business while on duty. Hughes had known Connor Ross for over a decade. They had worked cases together, attended department barbecues, and their families had shared holiday meals. The idea that Connor might be involved in corruption was almost incomprehensible, but the evidence was undeniable. Olivia's camera had captured him accepting what appeared to be a cash payment from an unknown individual with no official police business. As Hughes continued reviewing the footage, a pattern began to emerge. Olivia had been conducting her own private investigation into several members of the department, documenting suspicious activities and building what appeared to be a comprehensive case against multiple officers. She had been working alone, without official authorization, and without backup, a dangerous approach that might have cost her everything. The investigation took on new urgency when forensic specialists recovered audio from one of the final recordings. In it, Olivia could be heard making a phone call to someone she trusted, though the recipient's voice was too faint to identify clearly. "I think they know," she whispered into her phone. "I've been careful, but Hayes has been asking questions about my overtime hours. I need to move faster." Captain Gabriel Hayes found himself in an impossible position. The recovered evidence suggested that Olivia had suspected him of being involved in whatever corruption she was investigating. His inquiries about her overtime, which he had made as a concerned supervisor worried about officer burnout, had apparently been interpreted as something more sinister. The irony was heartbreaking. His attempts to look out for Olivia's well-being might have convinced her that he was part of the problem. Hughes decided to approach the investigation systematically, starting with the officers Olivia had been surveilling. Connor Ross was the obvious first target, but confronting him directly would alert others who might be involved. Instead, Hughes began his own covert surveillance operation, using techniques Olivia had pioneered in her final weeks. What he discovered was a sophisticated network of corruption that extended beyond simple cash payments. Several officers were providing protection for illegal gambling operations, while others were selling confiscated drugs back onto the streets. The scheme was organized and extensive, involving at least 6 officers and generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in illicit revenue. The most disturbing revelation came when Hughes discovered that the corruption ring had been operating for years, long before Olivia began her investigation. They had grown comfortable and careless, which explained how a dedicated detective like Olivia had been able to gather so much evidence against them. But their comfort had also made them dangerous. They had too much to lose to allow their operation to be exposed. Hughes began to understand why Olivia had worked alone. The scope of the corruption meant she couldn't trust anyone within the department, including her own partner. She had been building a case that would require federal intervention, something that would have destroyed the careers and lives of multiple officers and their families. The weight of that responsibility must have been enormous. As Hughes delved deeper into the recovered footage, he found evidence that Olivia had been in contact with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Phone records showed multiple calls to a Detroit-based federal agent in the weeks before her disappearance. She had been preparing to turn over her evidence to federal authorities, a move that would have triggered a massive investigation into the Detroit Police Department. The timeline was becoming clearer. Olivia had gathered enough evidence to build a federal case against the corruption ring. She had made contact with the FBI and was preparing to become a federal witness. But somehow, the corrupt officers had learned of her investigation and moved to silence her before she could expose them. Hughes realized he was now in the same position Olivia had been in 8 years earlier. He possessed evidence of widespread corruption within his own department, and he couldn't be sure who he could trust. The difference was that he had the benefit of hindsight and the knowledge of what had happened to the last person who had tried to expose the truth. The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Captain Hayes was demanding regular updates on the investigation, but Hughes wasn't sure if his reports were being shared with the very people he was investigating. The media had caught wind of the body camera discovery, and reporters were asking uncomfortable questions about why it had taken 8 years to find evidence that had been buried just 3 feet underground in an area that should have been searched thoroughly during the original investigation. Most challenging of all was the knowledge that Olivia's family deserved answers. Her brother Benjamin had never stopped believing that she was alive somewhere, possibly being held against her will or suffering from amnesia. The recovered footage suggested a much darker reality, that Olivia had likely been murdered to prevent her from exposing the corruption she had discovered. Chapter 3: Uncovering the Truth. The breakthrough came when forensic specialists recovered a series of encrypted files from Olivia Green's body camera that had been hidden using advanced steganographic techniques. Detective Ryan Hughes watched in amazement as experts extracted hours of additional footage that Olivia had concealed within seemingly routine patrol recordings. She had been even more thorough and careful than anyone had realized. The hidden files revealed the full scope of Olivia's investigation and the deadly game she had been playing in her final weeks. She had documented not just individual acts of corruption, but an entire systematic operation that reached into the highest levels of the Detroit Police Department. The evidence was damning and comprehensive, exactly the kind of case that federal prosecutors dream of building. One of the most shocking revelations came from footage dated just 2 days before Olivia's disappearance. The camera had captured a conversation between Detective Connor Ross and Sergeant Leo Foster, a 20-year veteran who supervised the evidence room. They were discussing the need to handle the Green situation before it became a problem for everyone involved. The implications were chilling. They had known about Olivia's investigation and were planning to stop her. Hughes realized he needed backup he could trust, but the scope of the corruption made it impossible to know who was safe within the department. He made the difficult decision to contact the FBI directly, following the same path Olivia had taken 8 years earlier. Special Agent Charlotte Stewart from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Public Corruption Unit agreed to meet with Hughes at a secure location outside Detroit. Agent Stewart revealed that the FBI had indeed been in contact with Detective Green. In October 2016, she had provided them with preliminary evidence and was scheduled to deliver her complete case file on October 15th, the same day she disappeared. The federal investigation had been suspended when their key witness vanished, but they had never closed the file. The recovery of Olivia's body camera provided the evidence they needed to restart their investigation. Working with federal agents, Hughes began to understand the sophisticated nature of the corruption ring. It wasn't just about individual officers taking bribes or skimming drug money. The operation involved manipulating evidence, protecting criminal enterprises, and even influencing criminal prosecutions. Several major drug dealers had avoided conviction because evidence had mysteriously disappeared from the police property room, while others had received advance warning of planned raids. The financial scope was staggering. Federal accountants estimated that the corruption ring had generated over $2 million in illicit revenue over a 5-year period. The money had been laundered through legitimate businesses and offshore accounts, with each participating officer receiving regular payments that supplemented their police salaries by $50,000 or more annually. As the federal investigation expanded, Hughes found himself reliving the final weeks of his partnership with Olivia through the lens of her recovered footage. He could see now that she had been under enormous stress, working late hours and taking on additional cases to provide cover for her real investigation. She had been building something much larger than a simple corruption case she was documenting. A criminal conspiracy that reached into multiple departments and agencies. The most heartbreaking discovery came when specialists recovered audio from what appeared to be Olivia's final recording. She had been meeting with someone she trusted, apparently to hand over copies of her evidence. The conversation was partially corrupted, but analysts were able to reconstruct enough to understand that she had been betrayed by someone close to her. "I thought I could trust you," Olivia's voice could be heard saying. "I thought you were one of the good ones." The response was too distorted to understand clearly, but the tone was apologetic and pained. Whoever she was meeting with had clearly been struggling with their role in what was about to happen to her. Hughes spent sleepless nights trying to identify the person Olivia had been meeting with in those final hours. The voice patterns didn't match any of the known corrupt officers, which suggested that the conspiracy involved someone who had successfully maintained their cover. This person had been close enough to Olivia to earn her trust, but ultimately had chosen to protect the corruption ring rather than help expose it. The investigation took a dramatic turn when federal agents executed simultaneous search warrants at the homes and offices of 6 Detroit police officers. The raids yielded computer files, financial records, and physical evidence that corroborated everything Olivia had documented in her hidden recordings. Connor Ross was arrested while trying to destroy documents in his backyard, while Leo Foster was found with over $200,000 in cash hidden in his basement. Captain Gabriel Hayes watched his department implode as officers he had worked with for decades were led away in handcuffs. The media coverage was relentless, with reporters questioning how such extensive corruption could have operated undetected for so long. Internal Affairs launched their own investigation, trying to determine how their oversight mechanisms had failed so completely. But the biggest question remained unanswered. What had happened to Detective Olivia Green? The body camera provided evidence of her investigation and the corruption she had uncovered, but it didn't reveal her ultimate fate. Federal agents were treating her disappearance as a homicide, but without a body or witnesses, building a murder case would be challenging. Hughes continued his own investigation, focusing on the question that haunted him most. Who was the person Olivia had trusted enough to meet with on her final night? The answer, he was beginning to suspect, held the key to understanding not just what had happened to his partner, But who among his colleagues had been living a lie for the past 8 years? The pressure was building on all the arrested officers to cooperate with federal investigators. Facing decades in prison, several began to consider plea deals that would require them to testify against their co-conspirators. But none of them were admitting to any knowledge of what had happened to Olivia Green, maintaining that her disappearance was as much a mystery to them as it was to everyone else. Hughes knew they were lying. Someone knew what had happened to Olivia, and that person was still out there, still protected by their silence and their secrets. The recovered body camera had provided answers to many questions, but the most important question of all remained. Where was Detective Olivia Green, and who was responsible for making her disappear? Chapter 4. The Betrayal Revealed. Asterisk. The breakthrough in identifying Olivia Green's final contact came from an unexpected source. While analyzing the recovered audio files, FBI forensic specialists noticed something unusual in the background noise of her last recording. There was a distinctive sound pattern, a rhythmic tapping that occurred whenever the unknown person spoke. Agent Charlotte Stewart recognized it immediately. It was the nervous habit of someone tapping their class ring against a table, a behavior she had observed countless times during interviews and interrogations. Detective Ryan Hughes felt his blood run cold when he heard the analysis. Only a handful of people in the Detroit Police Department wore class rings regularly, and only one person had the kind of nervous habit that would manifest during stressful conversations. It was a detail so small that it had been overlooked for 8 years, but it pointed directly to Detective Isaac Ward, a 15-year veteran who had been considered above suspicion. Isaac Ward had been part of the original team that investigated Olivia's disappearance. He had worked closely with Hughes, conducting interviews and following leads. He had attended the memorial service for Olivia, comforting her family and promising her brother Benjamin that they would never stop looking for her. The betrayal was so profound that Hughes initially refused to believe it, but as federal agents dug deeper into Ward's background, a disturbing picture emerged. Financial records showed that he had been receiving regular payments from an offshore account linked to the corruption ring. His lifestyle had gradually improved over the years: a new house, expensive vacations, private school tuition for his children, all funded by money that couldn't be explained by his police salary. The most damning evidence came when federal agents executed a search warrant at Ward's home. Hidden in his basement office, they found detailed files on Olivia's investigation. He had been monitoring her activities for weeks, documenting her surveillance operations and tracking her progress in building a case against the corruption ring. He had been the inside source that allowed the corrupt officers to stay one step ahead of her investigation. Hughes reviewed his memories of those final weeks, looking for signs he had missed. Ward had seemed genuinely concerned about Olivia's long hours and erratic behavior. He had volunteered to help with her caseload, offering to take on some of her routine assignments so she could focus on what he claimed were her more important investigations. In hindsight, it was clear that he had been trying to learn more about what she was working on. The recovered body camera footage took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of Ward's betrayal. In several recordings, Olivia could be seen interacting with Ward, discussing cases and sharing information. She had trusted him completely, viewing him as a mentor and friend. The corruption ring had used that trust against her, turning one of her closest colleagues into their most valuable asset. Federal investigators were able to reconstruct the final hours of Olivia's life based on phone records, surveillance footage, and witness statements that had been overlooked during the original investigation. On October 14, 2016, Ward had contacted Olivia and arranged to meet her at an abandoned warehouse in Detroit's industrial district. He had convinced her that he had information about the corruption ring that would help complete her case. Olivia had gone to the meeting believing she was finally getting the backup she desperately needed. Instead, she was walking into a trap that Ward and the other corrupt officers had carefully planned. The warehouse location had been chosen specifically because it was isolated and had no surveillance cameras. It was the perfect place to make someone disappear. Security footage from a nearby business showed Olivia's car arriving at the warehouse. At 11:47 p.m., Ward's vehicle was already there, along with at least 2 other cars that belonged to members of the corruption ring. The footage showed several figures moving around the building, but the distance and poor lighting made it impossible to identify individuals or determine exactly what was happening. What was clear was that Olivia's car left the warehouse area at 12:23 a.m., but she wasn't driving it. One of the corrupt officers had moved her vehicle to the diner on 8 Mile Road, where it was discovered the next morning. The careful staging was designed to make her disappearance look like a random crime or voluntary departure, deflecting attention from the corruption investigation that had motivated her murder. Hughes struggled with the knowledge that he had worked alongside Olivia's killer for 8 years. Ward had helped him review evidence, had listened to his theories about what might have happened to her, and had even provided emotional support during the darkest moments of the investigation. The psychological manipulation was almost as disturbing as the murder itself. When federal agents arrested Isaac Ward at his home, his wife collapsed in shock. Their 3 children watched in confusion as their father was led away in handcuffs, charged with conspiracy, corruption, and first-degree murder. The family had been living a lie for years, enjoying the benefits of blood money while maintaining the facade of a respected police officer's household. Under interrogation, Ward initially maintained his innocence, claiming that he had been framed by the real corrupt officers. But when faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, financial records, recorded conversations, and physical evidence from his home, he finally broke down and confessed to his role in the conspiracy. The confession revealed the full horror of what had happened to Detective Olivia Green. Ward admitted that the corruption ring had decided she was too dangerous to be allowed to live. They had planned her murder carefully, using Ward's relationship with her to lure her to the warehouse. Once there, she had been confronted with the full scope of the conspiracy and given a choice: join them or die. Olivia had chosen to die rather than compromise her integrity. According to Ward's confession, she had fought back when they tried to subdue her, resulting in a struggle that ended with her death. The corrupt officers had then disposed of her body in a location that Ward refused to reveal, even when offered a plea deal in exchange for the information. The body camera had apparently been removed from Olivia's uniform during the struggle and had been carelessly buried at the construction site, where it remained hidden until Thomas Simmons's excavator uncovered it 8 years later. Ward claimed that burying the camera had been Connor Ross's idea, a way to ensure that any evidence it contained would never be found. Hughes felt a mixture of relief and rage as Ward's confession filled in the final pieces of the puzzle. Relief that they finally knew what had happened to his partner, and rage that her killer had spent 8 years hiding in plain sight, pretending to help search for the woman he had murdered. Chapter 5: Justice and Redemption. The trial of Isaac Ward and his co-conspirators became one of the most closely watched corruption cases in Detroit's history. Federal prosecutors built their case around the evidence Olivia Green had gathered in her final weeks, using her own investigation to convict the people who had killed her. It was a poetic justice that would have made the dedicated detective proud. Detective Ryan Hughes took the witness stand to testify about his partner's dedication to justice and her unwavering integrity. He described how Olivia had approached every case with thorough professionalism, how she had volunteered for community outreach programs, and how she had inspired everyone around her to be better officers. His testimony painted a picture of a woman who had died protecting the values she had sworn to uphold. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. Beyond Ward's confession and the evidence from Olivia's body camera, federal investigators had uncovered a paper trail that documented years of systematic corruption. Bank records, intercepted communications, and testimony from cooperating witnesses created a comprehensive picture of criminal conspiracy that reached into multiple levels of the Detroit Police Department. Connor Ross, facing a potential life sentence, had agreed to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed the cold calculation behind Olivia's murder. The corruption ring had viewed her not as a colleague or fellow human being, but as a threat to their financial security. They had discussed killing her for weeks before Ward volunteered to arrange the meeting that would lead to her death. Leo Foster, the evidence room supervisor, received a 25-year sentence for his role in the conspiracy. His control over physical evidence had been crucial to the operation's success, allowing them to make cases disappear and protect their criminal associates. Several major drug dealers were rearrested and convicted based on evidence that Foster had hidden rather than destroyed. But it was Isaac Ward who received the harshest sentence. Judge Patricia Collins sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, describing his betrayal of Olivia's trust as one of the most heinous acts she had encountered in her career. "You didn't just murder a police officer," she told Ward during sentencing. "You murdered someone who trusted you, who considered you family, who believed you shared her commitment to justice." Throughout the trial, Olivia's brother Benjamin Murphy had attended every session, sitting in the front row and serving as a reminder of the human cost of corruption. Pastor Murphy had struggled with forgiveness, wrestling with his Christian faith's call to show mercy to those who had wronged his family. In his victim impact statement, he spoke about the 8 years of uncertainty and pain his family had endured, not knowing whether Olivia was alive or dead. "My sister believed in justice," Pastor Murphy told the court. "She believed that good would triumph over evil, that truth would always come to light. Today, her faith has been vindicated. Today, justice has been served." His words brought tears to the eyes of everyone in the courtroom, including several of the defendants who finally seemed to grasp the magnitude of what they had done. The Detroit Police Department underwent massive reforms in the wake of the corruption scandal. Captain Gabriel Hayes retired early, unable to cope with the knowledge that such extensive criminal activity had operated under his command for years. New oversight mechanisms were implemented, including mandatory body cameras for all officers and regular financial audits to detect unexplained wealth. Detective Hughes was promoted to captain and put in charge of the department's new Internal Affairs Division. His first act was to establish the Olivia Green Memorial Fund, which provided college scholarships for children from Detroit's underserved communities. The fund was supported by donations from police officers across the country who had been inspired by Olivia's story. The construction site where Olivia's body camera had been discovered was transformed into a memorial garden. The city of Detroit dedicated the space to all fallen officers, but Olivia's name was prominently featured on the central monument. The inscription read, "Detective Olivia Green. She chose integrity over safety, truth over comfort, justice over silence." Despite the convictions and reforms, one question remained unanswered: where was Olivia's body? Ward had taken that secret with him to prison, refusing all appeals to reveal the location where they had disposed of her remains. For her family, this remained an open wound that prevented complete closure. Hughes never stopped looking for his partner. He followed up on every tip, investigated every possible location, and used new forensic techniques as they became available. He knew that finding Olivia's remains wouldn't bring her back, but it would allow her family to lay her to rest with the dignity she deserved. 2 years after Ward's conviction, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Connor Ross, serving his reduced sentence, contacted federal agents with information about Olivia's burial site. Facing his own mortality after a cancer diagnosis, Ross finally decided to provide the closure that Olivia's family desperately needed. On a cold November morning in 2026, exactly 10 years after her disappearance, Detective Olivia Green was finally brought home. Her remains were found in a remote area of Rouge Park, buried deep enough to avoid detection, but carefully marked so the conspirators could find the location if needed. The recovery operation was conducted with full honors, with hundreds of police officers lining the route as her remains were transported to the medical examiner's office. The funeral service was held at Mount Olive Baptist Church, where Olivia had grown up singing hymns and learning about justice and compassion. Pastor Benjamin Murphy delivered the eulogy for his sister, speaking about her unwavering faith and her commitment to protecting others. Police officers from across the country attended the service, paying their respects to a colleague who had made the ultimate sacrifice for justice. Captain Hughes served as one of Olivia's pallbearers, finally able to fulfill his promise to bring his partner home. As they carried her casket from the church, he whispered a vow that only she could hear. "Your work is done, partner. You can rest now. We'll take it from here." The Olivia Green story became a catalyst for police reform across the United States. Her investigation techniques were studied in law enforcement academies, and her commitment to integrity became a model for officers everywhere. The body camera that had preserved her final investigation was displayed in the International Association of Chiefs of Police headquarters, serving as a reminder that truth will always find a way to surface. In Detroit, Detective Olivia Green's legacy lived on through the officers she had inspired and the community she had served. Her story proved that one person's courage and integrity could expose corruption, bring justice to victims, and create lasting change. She had paid the ultimate price for her principles, but her sacrifice had not been in vain. This case reminds us all of the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's dangerous. Detective Olivia Green's faith, courage, and commitment to justice serve as an inspiration to us all. Her story shows us that truth will always prevail, even when it takes years to come to light. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that honor the victims and celebrate the pursuit of justice. Remember to share this video with others who believe in the power of truth and the importance of never giving up on justice.